Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jared Geetson, and I'm a third-year law student with the Law Review. It is my pleasure to introduce our final presenter for the day, the current United States Attorney for the District of North Dakota, Mr. Timothy Q. Purdon. Mr. Purdon was nominated by President Obama and unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate as North Dakota's 18th U.S. Attorney in 2010, replacing the current Lieutenant Governor of North Dakota, Drew Wrigley. Tim was born in Oaks, North Dakota. He received his BA from Moorhead State University in 1991 and went on to graduate cum laude from Hamline University School of Law in 1994, where he was a member of the Silver Gavel Honor Society as well as the Hamline Law Review. Following law school, he clerked for the Honorable Bruce M. Van Sickle of the North Dakota North Dakota District Court. Prior to becoming U.S. Attorney, Tim practiced law at the Vogel Law Firm in Bismarck. His focus was criminal defense, personal injury, and consumer fraud litigation. Before joining the Vogel Law Firm in 2005, Tim practiced for 9 years in Bismarck at the firm of Dixon and Purdon, where he gained extensive jury trial experience in both civil and criminal cases. As U.S. Attorney, Tim has worked to increase public safety in tribal communities in North Dakota, in addition to working closely with the government on matters of national security and drug trafficking associated with North Dakota's international border with Canada. Today, Tim will be presenting on the anti-violence strategy for tribal communities implemented by the U.S. Attorney's Office of North Dakota, which focuses on a three-pronged approach of enforcement, prevention, and reentry aimed at addressing violent crime on the reservations in North Dakota. He will further discuss the impact of his approach in regards to the prosecution of domestic violence and sexual assault cases in Indian country. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Purdon. Thank you.
Okay, I'm the last speaker. I have the coveted last slot of the day. That's my own fault. When the Law Review asked me to do this, I was very excited. I really wanted to be here. This is a very important issue to me, but I had a previous commitment. I was actually, this morning, I woke up in Watertown, South Dakota. I presented to the South Dakota Sheriff's Association on the challenges facing local law enforcement as a result of the Bakken oil boom out west, which they're starting to see some overflow there into northwestern South Dakota. So the Law Review was nice enough to juggle the schedule and let me be here, and I will hopefully make the last presentation here lively, entertaining, energetic. If you have questions during my speech, put your hand up. I may or may not call on you. I'll take questions for sure, but if something is pressing that you want to ask, put your hand up. Let's make this a little bit interactive. So he covered my bio. I had some background here, but I'll skip all that. I'll just say this to set the stage for the discussion of public safety in Indian country, and that's what we refer to it in the U.S. Attorney's Office. The reservations are called Indian country. That's a term of art. It's a legal term of art. That's what it's defined as by the U.S. Code. Crimes occurring in Indian country, the federal government has jurisdiction over under the Major Crimes Act. So the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Dakota is the primary prosecutor for all major crimes committed on the reservations in North Dakota. Now, I think he said I'm the 18th U.S. Attorney from North Dakota. So let's be clear, this is not an easy job to get. It's very difficult to become the U.S. Attorney. You have to really work hard and position yourself. And I decided in around 2001, 2002 that I wanted to be the U.S. Attorney for North Dakota someday, and I worked hard to put myself in a position to get that job. And the reason that I wanted the job, the reason I wanted to be U.S. Attorney was because of the experiences I had as a young lawyer in Indian country in North Dakota. When I came out of law school, I clerked for federal judge Bruce Van Sickle in Bismarck. Van Sickle was a federal judge. He was replaced by Pat Comney, who was replaced by Dan Hovland. That's the series of judges in Bismarck. And Judge Van Sickle had this tradition where he would have his law clerks spend a day with the probation and parole department, the federal probation and parole department, go down to the reservation, spend the day on the reservation. He insisted on it. And that sounded great, you know, so I'll never forget in 1994, the first time I ever visited an Indian reservation. I had grown up in a small town in Minnesota, very middle class, very non-diverse sort of community. And I had never been on a reservation before, and I will never, ever forget. I can close my eyes and picture it. The first time I drove into Cannonball, North Dakota on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, which is a town of, I don't know, about 1,000, I suppose, on the reservation, maybe 500 houses in a circle around a sort of common circle street. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that in the United States of America, the most powerful and richest country on earth, and in North Dakota, a very successful part of the country, that there were American citizens living in isolation and poverty. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything like it. I to this day I can't never forget the outrage I felt. And over time, as a lawyer in private practice, I represented many Native Americans. Before I became U.S. Attorney, I was on the public defender panel and defended federal criminal cases in federal court and represented many Native Americans who were charged under the Major Crimes Act in federal court as their defense lawyer. Spent a lot of time on the reservation, in their homes, in their cars, talking to them. How is it that you got in this position where you're in all this trouble? Tell me about your life. What can we argue to the judge? Why should you get a lesser sentence? And got to know people and got to understand how they grew up and the opportunities that I had that they didn't have. And it really, through that period of the 90s, struck me that this was wrong. And when I figured out that the U.S. Attorney in North Dakota, as the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for the state, that one of their key missions is trying to improve public safety in Indian country, that's when I decided that I wanted to become the U.S. Attorney. Now, I'm not the first, obviously the first American, the first person to look at the reservations and say this shouldn't be so. In fact, one of the last times that a sitting Attorney General of the United States visited North Dakota, this issue was on the agenda. That Attorney General was Robert Kennedy. I think we're in the middle of the 50th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis as we talk here. It's the 50th anniversary of various events in the Kennedy administration. And from my perspective as an employee of the Department of Justice, one of the most important things that Jack Kennedy did as president was appoint his brother, Bobby Kennedy, to be the Attorney General. Bobby probably continues to be the most famous Attorney General and associated with the Civil Rights Movement and the Cuban Missile Crisis, other things, but within the department, a real champion of civil rights. And in September of 1963, so this is 49 years ago, just 49 years ago this past September, Robert Kennedy was in Bismarck and he was participating in a meeting of the National Congress of American Indians, their 20th annual conference. 20 years they'd been an organization. And he spoke in Bismarck, North Dakota, about the injustice in the reservation system and the fact that a Native American infant, that their infant mortality rate on the reservation is 2 times what it is off the reservation, and that the life expectancy of a Native American man was 20 years less than of a Caucasian. And, so 49 years ago, the Attorney General of the United States came to Indian country to talk about these problems. Well, that's almost 50 years. Have these problems been addressed? Have they been changed? Are things better? Sadly, I think not. Today, 49 years later, infant mortality rate for Native Americans is 33% higher than those born off the reservation. A Native American is a 229% chance more likely to die in a motor vehicle accident than a non-Native American. A Native American is 61% more likely to die of murder than a non-Native American. And the suicide risk is 62% that for Caucasians. And for me, most personally, the statistic that impacts me is the fact that today, in 2012, in the United States of America, a Native American female baby, think about that, a Native American female baby. You can maybe picture her mom holding her, little baby, everybody's so happy, congratulations, you got a new baby, has a 1 in 3 chance of being sexually assaulted in her lifetime. Okay, I have a mom, a wife, and a daughter. Okay, and so when we're filling up with gas at the C-store in White Shield, and there's a Native family filling up with gas next to us, of the grandma and the auntie and the young kid, those 3 women, one of those carloads is playing Russian roulette, 1 in 3 chance. The other car doesn't have to worry about that. That's wrong, okay? Those people are American citizens, North Dakota's residents of North Dakota. That's wrong. It shouldn't be that way. So This is a challenge. This is the challenge that I have taken for the U.S. Attorney's Office over the last 2 years, because this challenge of public safety in Indian country is fundamental to moving the reservations forward, to addressing this isolation and poverty that the reservations in North Dakota face. My belief, my core belief, is that a Native American community, the people living on the reservation, are not going to be able to overcome decades and decades of isolation and poverty until first, fundamentally, they have what we have, what most of us have living in places like Grand Forks. They feel safe in their home and in their community. Without a basic level of public safety, you're never going to have economic development, people moving forward with their lives. If you're concerned about getting beat up or raped on a daily basis, how can we build a business? How can we build a community? So, you know, as the U.S. Attorney, I have the ability to try and impact that. I have the ability to try and improve public safety in Indian country, and it's a responsibility that I take very seriously, and it's a journey that we began as an office when I was confirmed. I've been on the job a little over 2 years now, and so I want to tell you a little bit about the changes we've made and some of the progress we've made. We haven't solved these problems, but some of the progress we've made over the last 2 years, and then maybe some of our plans for the future. The first thing we did was, I think, wisely, pat myself on the back, wisely recognize we weren't going to solve the problems in Belcourt from Bismarck, and we weren't going to solve the problems in Fort Yates from Fargo, and we're certainly not going to solve any of those problems in Washington, D.C. We had to hear from the people living in those communities. So we began a period of 6 to 8 months of engagement and consultation with the tribes. I physically visited every Indian reservation in North Dakota multiple times in that first 6 to 8 months as U.S. Attorney. And I had my staff, my lawyers working for me, traveling to the reservation with me, and meeting with the tribal council, and meeting with the tribal prosecutor, and the tribal police force, and the public defenders, and tribal members, and wherever we could. Because I wanted to, and I asked them this question: what can I do? What can the U.S. Attorney's Office do to make your community safer? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What should we be doing more of? And so we listened. It was a listening tour. And then we brought the tribes in North Dakota together for the first U.S. Attorney Listening Conference in the spring of 2011. Yeah, spring of 2011 at United Tribes Technical College. We had our listening conference, and we brought in some speakers, but mostly we had breakout sessions and listened to tribal members talk to us about what needed to be done in their community. We had 150 people attend the first of those meetings. The Bismarck Tribune, the editorial board of the Bismarck Tribune, said that it was the single, no, that's not the right word, the best outreach to the reservation. That's not right either, best. It was a refreshing change, I think is what they were trying to say, that this was a meeting that was much needed and they were glad it happened. And I was proud of that. But I have to tell you, during that period of consultation, I was struck and frustrated with the level of cynicism that I received from all members of North Dakota, okay? Cynicism from cynicism from law enforcement, cynicism from people and some of the people in my office, cynicism from the tribes. Oh, well, there's another person from Washington, another person represented the federal government here to make promises to us, you know. Very cynical. There was not a lot of hope. There was not a lot of hope, and this was very frustrating and troubling to me, because I believe that to change things, the first thing you have to do is be able to talk about it. Let's talk about our problems. Let's talk about a solution. Let's implement a solution. And if you can't even have a conversation because people are cynical about where you're coming from, what you're trying to accomplish, it's very difficult. And there was a real lack of hope. And I guess that's not surprising when you think about the isolation and poverty. I think it leads to hopelessness. And I can remember I talking to my wife and some of the other folks at the Department of Justice that are interested in this, talking about this. And, you know, I finally said on a phone call one time with one of my colleagues, U.S. Attorney from South Dakota, I said, you know what? I'm done, man. I'm not going to apologize for believing that we can make things better. Okay? I'm not going to apologize for trying to make the reservations in North Dakota a safer place. That's not something you should have to apologize for. And I'm not going to apologize for trying to renew and bring a sense of hope to the reservations. Because you know what? When a 14-year-old Dakota girl from Cannonball fashions a noose and gets up on a chair, it's because there's no hope. So we did a lot of talking the first year, a lot of listening, and then a lot of talking. And talk is cheap, and I get all that, but we'll get to the doing. But the first thing we had to do was talk about making communities safer and trying to get people to believe that it was something that could be accomplished. And so, man, we put a lot of miles in the car. We spent a lot of time on the reservation. We listened. We realized we didn't have a magic wand. All we had was the resources. All I control is the resources of the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's all I have control over. And the number of hours in the day that I can spend working on this. So we spent a lot of time listening, and we put together our anti-violence strategy, which we rolled out and implemented last summer, the summer of 2011. Let me take a step back. Before the anti-violence strategy was completed, though, we'd already made some changes in the office. When I came to the U.S. Attorney's Office, there were 3 lawyers handling the criminal cases that were coming off the 4 reservations in North Dakota. We had a single AUSA handling all the violent crimes from Standing Rock and Fort Berthold, and then an AUSA handling Turtle Mountain, and an AUSA in Fargo handling Spirit Lake. I'd been U.S. Attorney about 4 months, and I made a change. I brought another AUSA into the Indian Country portfolio and put each one of them in charge of doing the cases off of a single reservation. So we went from 3 Indian Country prosecutors to 4. 33% increase. First thing he did, I had control over that, I could do that. So I did it. And that AUSA, Gary DeLorme, had been in place at Standing Rock for about 6 or 8 months as part of the team before the anti-violence strategy came out. And the anti-violence strategy is really the result of 2 things, or really a combination of 2 things. It owes a great debt to the Department of Justice's national anti-violence strategy, which was put together by a group of U.S. attorneys who handle or are responsible for large urban areas. And the theory, the strategy, the 30,000-foot stuff is very similar, because I believed after my consultation that that strategy would apply in Indian Country as well. So the strategy of the document is 3 prongs. How do you make a community safer? I believe that as a prosecutor, there are 3 ways I can impact safety in a community. The first is enforcement, vigorous enforcement of criminal laws, federal criminal laws. To put too fine a point on it, putting people in jail. Okay, we are going to enforce federal laws. We are going to try and take those most dangerous members of any community, in this case it happens to be a reservation, trying to take those most dangerous members who are offending against their own people and remove them from the community. Simple as that. The second prong is prevention, because while enforcement is very important, really our job 1, you're not going to arrest your way out of a crime problem. You have to also have support and create viable crime prevention programs. And then the third prong is reentry of people coming out of prison. 95% of those most dangerous folks I was just talking about, they're going to go to prison. Someday they're going to come back to the reservation. They're going to come back home. What are we doing to support them in making sure that they're not recidivists? And so that is the strategy. And I could talk about that all night, but that's kind of esoteric. And so let me talk a little bit about some of the initiatives. That strategy, let's talk about tactics. Let's talk about what we did to further those strategies. First, enforcement, okay? I am very pleased to report to you that I have some new statistics that have not been previously publicly released, that from 2009, fiscal year 2009, to fiscal year 2012, the number of cases that the U.S. Attorney's Office has prosecuted coming off the reservations has increased 84%. We are doing 84% more cases in federal court. Now people say, oh my God, crime must be way up. I don't believe that the crime rate has gone up. We have more resources. We are devoting more resources. We are not declining or choosing to not prosecute as many cases. Our case numbers have gone up. Our declination rate, which is a very controversial topic, and which DOJ will be soon announcing a new study of the declinations rate. And I think in that study, when it becomes public, I believe that you'll see our declination rate has gone down. That's because if we don't do those felony cases, rape, domestic violence, burglary, assault resulting in serious bodily injury, the only other alternative is the tribal court, which is a misdemeanor court. We have to do those cases. We can't have, in my opinion, the number 1 priority of my office is national security. That's the fact. When you work for the Department of Justice, national security, the Canadian border, border security. But as a U.S. attorney in North Dakota, the percentage of work we have coming off the Indian country, this is our second priority. We want to make the community safer. So I'm very pleased we've made progress with the enforcement prong. Now, as the U.S. attorney, you get criticized for two things. Okay? You get criticized, you're not bringing enough cases in Indian country. Your declination rate is too high. You're not bringing enough cases. Then you get criticized. You're bringing too many cases. There are too many young Native men that are getting felony records and it's ruining their life. There's a balance there. And we're going to talk about those young Native men and that. We're going to get to that. But I want you to know in this point that I understand that it's a fine line and that there are two sides to that. But my goal is to remove those most dangerous predators so that there's not an additional victim. Okay? And that's, I don't apologize for that. I'm a prosecutor. That's what I do. All right, so, yes, ma'am. Yep. That's my office. That's my office. That's not national. That's in the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Dakota. So the anti-violence strategy enforcement, okay? Second prong, or the second tactic that we're using to push the strategy of enforcement is our community prosecution model. And this is the key. This is the big one, I think. I'm requiring the United States attorneys who work for me, the assistants, that are handling a reservation to physically go to that reservation once a month, once every 5 or 6 weeks, on non-case related travel. You're not just going down there to interview witnesses for your case. I want you to go to the reservation and meet with the chief of police and meet with the tribal prosecutor and provide some training while you're there. You know, and conduct an MDT meeting, a multidisciplinary team meeting of law enforcement, tribal prosecutor, tribal law enforcement, FBI, marshal service, social workers, child protection workers. Let's get them all together so that we have a victim-focused approach, so that we make sure that the victims that we're dealing with in cases are being dealt with not just as witnesses, but also as victims. And in calendar year 2011, AUSAs in my office made 60 trips to the reservation. That's a resource I can control. And I'm sharing that resource with the reservation. My belief is that the AUSAs in my office who are doing Indian country cases, yeah, they're prosecutors, but they also need to be part of that reservation community. Because it's only through community policing and community prosecution that communities get safer. So when I send them down, I'm sending down, I mean, that's like a Delta Force team. I mean, my AUSAs, they are the smart, in my opinion, I'm biased, in my opinion, the smartest, best educated, hardest working, culturally sensitive, problem-solvingest representatives of the federal government that interact with a tribe. I believe that. And I want to share that resource with the tribe. I want to make my AUSA and the tribal prosecutor be best friends, so that they're talking every week about how these cases, should this case go into federal court? Should this case go down into, maybe this is a case we should handle as a misdemeanor. Great example of this. Last summer, early last summer, we had a big drug bust at Standing Rock. We arrested, federal and tribal authorities arrested 16 or 17 defendants who allegedly were selling drugs on the Standing Rock reservation. Interestingly, the drug of choice was pharmaceuticals. I was a little surprised by that, but the abuse of pharmaceutical drugs is a problem in Indian country just as it is in Grand Forks. Now, some number, 11 or 12 of those folks had lengthy criminal records. They'd been drug dealing for many years, alleged, you know, that they'd been convicted. We charged those folks in tribal court. But there were 4 or 5 of them that were maybe young people that just made that first step down the wrong path. Because we had a strong relationship with that tribal prosecutor in the tribal court at Standing Rock, because my AUSA and that tribal prosecutor trusted each other and were working together, we said, let's charge those folks in tribal court with misdemeanors. If we hadn't had that relationship, if Gary DeLorme, the AUSA in my office, wasn't part of that community, didn't have that relationship, those young men would have either been charged with a federal felony, maybe overcharged because we had another choice, or not charged at all, which is obviously not the right message to send. So that community prosecution model, the AUSA becoming part of the reservation community, is a key prong of our anti-violence strategy. We also made some other changes that we had control over in the office. We formed an Indian country team within the office. We now meet once a month, all the lawyers and staff who deal with Indian country cases, to talk about cases, to talk about initiatives, to spend 1 hour a month talking about strategy. That was a change that we made. I didn't get a raise, but I created a title for one of the lawyers in my office, made him the special counsel to the U.S. Attorney for North Dakota. Rick Volk is one of the leading Indian law experts in the state. Jan Morley, who was here earlier today, is our tribal liaison. Rick deserved recognition for what he's done. Raise the profile of Indian country. Make people in the office want to work on the reservation because it's high profile, it's rewarding. We did that. We implemented as part of our strategy the tribal consultation provisions of the Tribal Law and Order Act. TLOA, which was passed about the same time I got confirmed, summer of 2010, requires that when a U.S. Attorney's Office decides not to prosecute a case, that it consults with the tribal prosecutor, so that if the tribe wants to bring the case, they can. We now require, if we make a non-prosecution decision, first, didn't used to be this way, we write a memo explaining why. Called a non-prosecution memo. Let's explain our decision. We send that to the FBI, the BIA, and the tribal prosecutor. If that tribal prosecutor wants to prosecute that case, he has a form that he can sign and send back, send it to us. We'll take our file of evidence and give it to him. Now we can't, I don't control the FBI's evidence, I control mine, but we'll do that and we'll liaise between that tribal prosecutor and the FBI to see if they can assist him in his prosecution. So that was something required by law that we did because it's important. It's that communication. And then we started a sex trafficking working group on the Fort Berthold Reservation. We had a major case last spring where a human trafficking ring, a gang that was selling drugs and prostituting out young girls and sexually assaulting young girls was taken down, a lengthy prison sentence resulting in a case that Rick did. And that led to the creation of a sex trafficking working group. Obviously, we have huge population growth in the Bakken oil field, people from out of state coming in. With the internet, Backpage.com, that sort of thing, the possibility of the exploitation of young Native women is a vulnerability that we want to make sure we stay ahead of. And then, most rewardingly, just most amazingly, as part of our original tribal anti-violence strategy, we started a school outreach program. And basically, this was two of the U.S. attorneys in my office, both of whom are Native American. They came to me and said, would you mind if we spent some time at the schools when we were on the reservation? I said, no, I don't mind at all. That sounds like a great idea. So Jan at Spirit Lake has spent some time in the schools, but Gary DeLorme, who's the prosecutor handling Standing Rock, last year he presented 8 separate blocks of educational material to the Standing Rock High School and Middle School on the dangers of drinking, the dangers of drugs, safe use of the internet. Don't be sexting people. Don't be looking at child pornography. It brought in some victims of sexual assault to talk to kids about, as a victim, how do you cope with that? And included Native American law enforcement officers and non-Native law enforcement officers in that. And Gary reports that from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, the number of kids that would come up after the presentation to talk to the law enforcement officers and say to them, well, how did you get to be a law enforcement officer? What's that career path like? Do you like working for the BIA? Things like that. And it allows them to talk about how the decisions that you make as a young person are going to define you, they're going to follow you, and so you need to follow the rules now and to be a good citizen now. And that program, we had the Deputy Attorney General here, the #2 person in the whole Department of Justice, went down, toured Standing Rock, participated in one of those presentations. It's a national model for DOJ and a crime prevention strategy. We're getting to work with young Native American students and saying to them, we want to work with you so that you understand the ramifications of committing a crime. We don't want to see you in court, and this is why. So we started that. That was the initial strategy in the summer of 2011. A copy of the anti-violence strategy is available on our website. You can see this. It's a public document. It's on our website, as is what I'm about to talk about next, which is our annual review of the anti-violence strategy, which we completed this past summer. We talked about the increase in prosecutions. We talked about the community prosecution model, the 60 trips to the reservation. We talked about some of the other programs we'd implemented as well. Talking about that prosecutor at Standing Rock who we cooperated with in that drug bust, we've made that prosecutor, he's an employee of the tribe, the Standing Rock tribe. He's their chief prosecutor. But he's also designated by the Department of Justice now as a special assistant United States attorney. So he has the ability in the right case, say a domestic violence case where you've got a non-native offender against a native woman that the tribal court doesn't have jurisdiction over. We can bring that case in federal court. And that offender can no longer escape justice from the Standing Rock tribe. Because when we bring that case in federal court, Gary DeLorme stands up from my office and says, I'm Gary, I represent the United States of America. And Grant Walker, an employee of the Standing Rock tribe, stands up next to him and says, I'm Grant Walker, I also represent the United States of America. And we're going to get justice for this victim, even though we can't bring this case in tribal court. What a powerful symbol of cooperation and coordination between the federal government and our tribal partners. We're very excited about that. That is a real important step that we've taken. We're going to double down on that at Standing Rock. The Department of Justice has funded an additional tribal prosecutor for Standing Rock. The prosecutor will go to work every day at Standing Rock. They'll be an employee of the tribe. They'll be funded by DOJ Office of Violence Against Women funds. And they'll also be a SAUSA, able to prosecute domestic violence cases in tribal court, in federal court in South Dakota, and in federal court in North Dakota. Additional resources, additional cooperation with the tribe. We held a training program at Fort Berthold where they no longer have BIA police officers. They have a tribal police force there. Rick Volk, I think, trained 19 of the tribal police officers so that they could receive their special law enforcement commission and become federal officers. Once they have that training, they can enforce tribal law, but also federal law, which gives them the ability to detain non-natives. It also gives them status as a federal law enforcement officer so that if they're assaulted, it's a federal crime, not just a tribal crime. We accomplished that last year. I talked about the school outreach program. We provided at the Spirit Lake Reservation about a year ago right now, we were up there for some training where we brought a pediatrician from Fargo who specialized in sexual abuse and neglect of neglect, and sexual abuse of children up to the Spirit Lake Reservation to meet with law enforcement, first responders, IHS folks, to talk to them about the signs of trying to identify children that are being abused or neglected. That was an initiative that we put in place long before some of the problems that you've seen, probably read about in the paper about Spirit Lake. We were there a year ago trying to provide training. And that's the sort of training we're looking to provide to all the tribes through the AUSA presence. You get one of the lawyers on the reservation, they start to see where the holes are. Oh, I should do some training on this. This was one of those examples. We've conducted prescription drug take-back initiatives in conjunction with the DEA on all the reservations, taking back pounds of prescription drugs that people had in their medicine cabinet waiting to get stolen. Instead, they gave them to the DEA, and we don't have to worry about them on the street. Working with the North Dakota Attorney General's Office and many other folks, we've conducted training on SORNA on the various reservations to try and help the tribes get in compliance with the Sex Offender Registration Act. We held a second tribal conference, tribal listening conference or consultation conference last spring. That's going to be an annual event for us. We again had 150, 160 people there. Again, we had the number 2 official at the entire Department of Justice participated in that. As a symbol to show the DOJ's national focus on Indian country safety. And we had another great conference there. We had there's a joint conference we do with South Dakota U.S. Attorney's Office, a victim-centered conference offering hope to victims of violent crime. For the first time ever, that was held in North Dakota this year. It had always been held in South Dakota, but we held that in Fargo and had participation from South Dakota tribes, North Dakota tribes, and for the first time, several tribes from northwestern Minnesota participated with us. That was great. And we've made additional plans for the future. We've created in our office a white-collar and public corruption team. Now, that's not directly focused at Indian country, but those AUSAs that are prosecuting violent crimes on Indian country, they're also responsible for the public corruption cases, people stealing from the federal government. And that's really an apples and oranges deal. I mean, violent crime prosecutors, murder, rape, drugs, that sort of stuff. white collar, big boxes of documents, you need accountants and things like that. We're going to take responsibility for those white collar cases, public corruption cases, away from the violent crime AUSAs, centralize them with AUSAs that specialize in that. So again, our violent crime prosecutors can focus on doing what they do best. Additional resources in our office devoted to Indian country. And then reentry, the third prong, which frankly as a prosecutor is very difficult. I can't run a reentry program, I'm a prosecutor. But we're going to work, we've made some strides working with the federal court. We're going to be, I think, hopefully piloting some programs over the next year. I'm committed to doing something to make sure that we're supporting the folks that are coming out of prison back home, back to the reservation, so that they have the resources, they have additional structure, they have the chemical dependency treatment, the access to a job, whatever we can do to assist them so that we can reduce the recidivism rates in Indian country in North Dakota. I'm very committed to that. So that's our anti-violence strategy. I want to say a few words about tribal courts and then I'm going to wrap up. I believe that that's what I can do with my 18 lawyers and the staff in my office. It's not enough, but it's the resources I control. After spending 2 years in Indian country working on these issues very, very deeply, I believe that the answer, if the problem is public safety, the answer is tribal courts. If you have a strong tribal court system on a reservation that consistently and efficiently and effectively deals with misdemeanor crimes, you will have a safer reservation. We've seen it in Standing Rock, where they've invested in their tribal court, they've protected the independence of the tribal court. The council stays away from the tribal court. It's a separate, equal, independent branch of that tribal government. They have a couple of very good prosecutors. They have a very good tribal judge. They go to jury trial. They move the ball down the court. We have that connection, so we trust that if we decide not to charge a case, because maybe the person doesn't need to be charged with a federal felony and they get charged with a tribal misdemeanor, that the case will be handled, will be done. And so I encourage folks, I mean, you know, if you're interested in, as a law student, if you're interested in your legal career if you're interested in Indian law, you're interested in helping people, what can you do? You get a law degree, man. That's a very powerful thing. Figure out a way to help your local tribal court. The tribal judge that was brought into Standing Rock 5 years ago was non-native. A retired lawyer from Bismarck, had a very good reputation, went down and, along with the help of the tribe and folks there and the prosecutors, they've built a court system that's one of the best district court systems in North Dakota. Seriously. I mean, it's a very good court system. And as a result, that community is safer. Okay? So I encourage everyone to get involved in tribal courts. I'm going to be meeting with the Native American Law Student Association tonight and tomorrow morning. We'll talk to them about opportunities in tribal courts and things like that, and we'll do that. But I think at tribal court, I mean, again, my point is this. The folks that are suffering from unsafe communities on those reservations, you know, that's domestic violence, sexual assault, heightened rates. I talked about 1 in 3 Native American babies, female babies, but the domestic violence rate on the reservations 3 times the national average. Okay, that's not a Standing Rock problem. Okay, that's not a Native American problem. That's a North Dakota problem. That reservation, these reservations are part of our community. We only got 640,000 people, 680,000 people in the whole state. That's the size of Louisville, Kentucky. This is one community. And it's not acceptable that one part of our community of North Dakota, it shouldn't be acceptable to Native people, it shouldn't be acceptable to non-Native people, that those crime rates are what they are. All of us with law degrees, all of us who've had advantages that many people don't have some responsibility to help our community. And if you're a young lawyer and you're looking a way to help your community, I encourage you to go where the need is greatest, tribal courts, and see how you can figure out a way to try and help those members of our community that face those Russian roulette odds that are simply wrong. So tribal courts are the answer. TLOA is a great first step, the Tribal Law and Order Act. The tribes are going to eventually, I think, as they build their court system, they'll be able to sentence folks not just to 1 year in jail, but up to 3 years. And again, that's empowering the tribes. That's solving the problem in Fort Yates, not trying to solve it from Bismarck or Washington. Empower the tribes, empower the courts, create partnerships, create strong tribal courts, and then we can all work together to make the community safer. So, I had several of my good friends that were concerned about me. About 9 months into being U.S. Attorney, I had some of we've got Godfather fans out there, my consiglieres came to me and said, dude, I mean, Indian country, how are you ever going to show any success? You know, it's great that that's what you want to do, but how are you going to show progress? Okay? And that's true. We've been at this 2 years. Can I say the reservations are safer? I won't say that. We're working harder. We're doing more. But this is not a problem you're going to, like, okay, well, you know, Indian country, 13 months, I knocked that out. What's next? That's not the way it works. It's taken us literally hundreds of years to build this problem to where it is. This is a 20, 25-year project to address, and the federal government can do things. We need the tribal government and the tribal courts to do things, but we first have to take a single step. Because if we don't try, we're not going to make it, you know, we don't choose to do these things because they are easy. We choose to do them because they are hard. So what I told my consigliere, who was concerned about my ability to point to successes, was I told him about a speech that Robert Kennedy made after he was Attorney General, after he'd resigned, on June 6th of 1966 in Cape Town, South Africa. And Bobby Kennedy said this: "Few of us will have the greatness to bend history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of the events, and in the total of all these acts will be written the history of this generation. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a person stands for an idea or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance." That's why I go to the reservation. That's why I care about that. That's why I'm asking each one of you that are going to leave this institution with a law degree, which is a powerful thing, to give some thought to giving back to your community. And if you're in North Dakota, as a North Dakotan, making a stand and saying, I will not allow other North Dakotans, I will not allow my brothers and sisters in North Dakota who happen to be Native American and happen to live on a reservation, I will not tolerate in my community unsafe environments for Native American female babies, for Native women. I will not tolerate it. All of this information is available on my website, as is my contact information. Any of you want to set up a legal clinic, get involved, you know, whatever. We have the relationships with the tribes. I know you have great resource here with Michelle and her folks at the Tribal Justice Center. Whatever we can do to support you. This is not a problem the U.S. Attorney's Office can solve. It's not a problem the tribes can solve. We need everyone in North Dakota to pull together for this. Thank you. I'll take questions here for 10 minutes if anybody's got any questions. I know it's been a long day. If there are no questions, that's fine too. Anybody?
Tim, I have a question to start. I would venture to say that the concerns in Indian country in North Dakota are not unique just to North Dakota. Have you guys been working with any other jurisdictions, any other state agencies to address this problem? This effort, my anti-violence strategy, every U.S. attorney, this is a new initiative of this Department of Justice, Attorney General Eric Holder. New initiative 2.5 years ago. Every U.S. Attorney's Office with responsibility for Indian country was required to put together an operations plan for their reservations. Our anti-violence strategy is our response to that requirement. The efforts that I'm talking about, they're not being replicated. It's a laboratory. We're trying different things in different spots. DOJ has funded 2 separate locations on 2 separate reservations where there's a full-time AUSA who goes to work every day on that reservation, at the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, the Menominee Reservation in Wisconsin. So their community prosecution strategy is truly community-based in that there's an AUSA there every day. We're replicating that in North Dakota as our resources allow, getting there more often. This is a national project. This is my and my office's North Dakota version of that project. Other questions?
That has been around for a while in law enforcement, and you're talking about in the context of lawyer prosecutions. Can you talk a little bit about the distinction, though, that the Major Crimes Act makes in terms of what is and what isn't an offense for purposes of the federal jurisdiction? My understanding has been the classic scenario is the non-native man abuses the native woman, and the federal government doesn't have any jurisdiction over it because it's not a rape or murder or assault with a deadly weapon.
There is yes. Cross-deputization means you got three laws: tribal law, state law, federal law. How are you going to enforce that? The answer is what's best is every cop in the jurisdiction is cross-deputized to enforce all the laws. Then this all goes away. That's unrealistic. We don't have that in North Dakota. There are lots of reasons for that. But specifically on the domestic violence question, the issue right now is that there's a gap in federal law because we don't have an escalating series of charges to respond to domestic violence as an escalating crime. If it's not an assault resulting in serious bodily injury, we can't bring it against a non-native if it's a native victim in the same household. Jan talked about Kavanaugh and some of the habitual stuff. Okay, so the solution is the legislation that was yeah, I think I could say proposed by the Department of Justice. I mean, we can't introduce bills in Congress, but I mean, it was written by the Department of Justice, proposed by the Department of Justice. The Violence Against Women Act, the tribal provisions, does a couple of things. It fills that hole for us and gives us that escalating, creates a couple new federal crimes to give us that. But more importantly, it gives the tribal court in a community jurisdiction over those who would do harm to that community. Now, some people would say, wait a minute, that's not what it does. It gives tribal court jurisdiction over white guys, okay? That's not true. It gives tribal court jurisdiction over people who have chosen to make their lives as part of a reservation community by living there or working there or marrying there or having a girlfriend there or a child there so that they are subject to justice in that community. Just like you and I, even though we may live in Grand Forks, or Bismarck, if we commit a crime in Fargo, we're responsible in that local community. That is the idea of VAWA. The Senate passed a version of VAWA that contained that. The House of Representatives passed a version of VAWA that did not contain that. And here we sit. So the Department of Justice is a strong proponent of the tribal provisions in the reauthorization of violence against women. It's intended to solve that very issue. So, you know what? Call your congressman. Call your, you know, I mean, that's this. We don't at DOJ. We don't get to make the rules. We suggested this. I was part of the team that helped write those provisions. It was a big team, but I was part of it. But we're hopeful that that's going to get passed. And again, what else does it do? And let's be very clear too. Only tribal courts who meet certain benchmarks are even able to do this. You have to have a tribal court that's basically TLOA eligible. You have to have public defenders and court reporters and law-trained lawyer judges and a law-trained prosecutor and the right to appeal and a transcript and a code that's set out. So it's not just instant jurisdiction. The tribe has to prove that their court system is consistent with the constitutional principles of the United States Constitution. And when they do that, they're given this carrot of enhanced jurisdiction. Again, genius, I think. Carrots. You strengthen your tribal court. I shouldn't say this, but okay, so Standing Rock's pretty close, I think, to implementing TLOA. I think they could get there. And if they do, they're going to start sentencing people to 3 years. When I go to the other reservations in North Dakota, I say, you know, Standing Rock, they've invested in their tribal court, and they may have TLOA ability, and if VAWA gets passed, they might be able to do that, and, you know, they're just going to have a little bit more sovereignty than you're going to have up here at Turtle Mountain. A little carrot, you know. You want a sovereign, strong, sovereign tribe. If you want a strong, sovereign tribe, strengthen your tribal court and take advantage of these enhanced sovereignty that is available to you. And in the process, we all win. The community becomes safer. The tribal court becomes stronger, which means that you have the rule of law on the reservation. What does that do? It attracts capital. It attracts business. It'll lead to economic development. There was a study done. One of the 2 factors that were identified as the main reasons that certain reservations had better economies than others, there were 2 causal factors that they identified. One of them was the strength of the tribal court system, the rule of law. Here we go.
What is your response to those who might hold the opinion that jail is not the answer?
I agree with them. It's not always the answer. Sometimes it's the answer. And if we're talking about a major crime, a rape, a murder, it's probably the answer. But one of the other things that DOJ is doing right now is I'm part of, we talked before I came in, the tribal justice plan continues, evolves. I'm part of a group on reentry. Okay, that's fine. An issue for tribal courts is alternatives to incarceration. I'm a big supporter that tribal courts need more resources to take in the community and address those folks that don't need to go to tribal jail for 30 days. They need help. They need alcohol treatment, drug treatment, job training. Yes. The folks that we see, and we need to do that. That's part of the whole. But the folks that we're talking about that come to my office, they've done something really bad, okay? I mean, the violence that we see, you know, it would not be acceptable in other, is not acceptable in other parts of North Dakota, but somehow is acceptable on the reservations. I project that as well, obviously. So, I mean, Michelle, you and I are very much on the same page. If I was a tribal prosecutor or a tribal judge, I'd be working very hard with DOJ and my tribe to get more money for non-jail, alternatives to corrections, sort of sentencing for misdemeanors. As the federal prosecutor, I have to balance, it's always that balance. Are you doing too many cases or not enough cases? Are you punishing young Indian guys and sticking them with a felony the rest of their life? Well, what about this victim? It's always a balance. And, you know, most of the time, that's not a close call because the crimes we're seeing, we have to remove that pedophile. We have to remove that habitual beater of his or his wife. We have to remove that person that's got 17 DUIs and then just committed involuntary manslaughter. That's most of what we do. Now, I want to be very supportive of alternatives to incarceration in tribal court, and that I'm very much a part of that. But it's a different part of the whole.
Like it's
fair enough?
In other words, tribal courts and the abilities that tribal courts possess to impose remedies, an important part of that might include enhanced sentencing through jail, but there are other portions or other remedies that might be available that are equally important. Would that be a fair
Absolutely, absolutely. In Toloa, you don't have to, I mean, it doesn't have to be a pure Western model. Just if you want to become Toloa compliant, you don't have to just have, I mean, there's a great place, there's, you know, peacemaking courts, traditional elder courts, that's all part of this. That's, if you strengthen the tribal court system, then you have the alternatives, all those alternatives are on the table. 5 minutes.
Tim,
yes, sir.
My question is, you've talked a lot about Standing Rock, but I've been on, as a recruiter, I've been out to these other reservations. I know the tribal judges and the prosecutors, public defenders on all the reservations, Spirit Lake, North, Turtle Mountain, Fort Berthold. Some are law trained out at Fort Berthold. Turtle Mountain, they're all lay advocate judges and prosecutors, public defenders. Spirit Lake, they have law trained judges, licensed judges.
You have a very good tribal prosecutor at Spirit Lake.
But no public defenders.
Yep.
How are you doing what the model has been done in Standing Rock? I mean,
it's funny that you should mention that.
Balancing tribal, keeping tribal courts strengthened versus all these federal laws that, you know, as a prosecutor, you're going to do that. But how do you balance?
Well, first, you care about it. You care about tribal courts. You care about working with them. You reach out. You make the good prosecutors into sousas. You give them training at DOJ expense. I'm going to be, I was a couple months ago in Seattle for a border conference and spent an afternoon at the Indian Law Clinic at the University of Washington, where they run a clinic, 4 professors. They provide all the public defender services to the Tulalip Nation and a couple of other tribes in Washington State. There's a great way for a community, hint, hint, a law school, hint, hint, to impact these issues. It's a win-win for them. Their students get great training and they provide public defender services. I'm going to be meeting with your dean tomorrow to talk about these and other great ideas that I have. But I'm committed. The tribal courts are a mixed bag across the country and in North Dakota. You're not going to become Toloa compliant without lawyers in your court system. Okay? I mean, I'm in a law school. I can probably say lawyers are important. You know, it's not all, you can't say that everywhere, but, you know, I'm a believer in getting lawyers in your court system. Native lawyers, absolutely. We got to train and equip and provide more native lawyers to tribal courts, absolutely. But we all have a responsibility as well. This is not a Native American problem. This is an American problem, a problem for all Americans. All right, come on. Anything else? That's it?
Tim, I had one more question.
Yep.
It might be kind of a complicated answer, so I don't know if you can answer it all now, but you indicated that prosecutions in the last 3 years have gone up 84%, but I would venture to say that the conviction rate is not that high based on investigation. What is the plan to help bolster the investigative part of this to help your office?
Exactly. The reason that the prosecutions are up 84%, there's a number of reasons. One of the reasons is by having that AUSA on the reservation once a month to meet with tribal police and talk about what are you working on. Oh, have you done this search warrant yet? Have you interviewed this witness yet? When the cases come to us now, they're stronger because our prosecutors have been involved earlier. The lawyer has been involved in the case earlier. So what am I doing to strengthen the quality of investigations in Indian country? Providing those investigators with the only asset I have, access and time with the very talented and committed and dedicated professional lawyers in my office. Anything else? Thank you so much. This is super fun for me. I appreciate it.